Images of glory in my mind at enlistment. Overhead a flapping red, white, and blue, filling the distance. A grand divide between myself and conscientious convictions or belief systems that stop people from killing over religion. I was young and I was out of options in my mind. It was supposed to be fun, my obligations ill-defined. I didn't want to take charge with a gun back in my mind. Without college or riches, no dreams to realize. Well, I never have the ladder of the Marines to get me to first. Ain't nothing better than dress blues and the one spitting this verse. To see the world hand to the GI Bill, fat in the purse. My recruiter made it sound simple, a play hit well rehearsed. Forever cursed to the ones who get young innocent signatures under the guise of regarded country their honor diminishes. Greed built a standing army when against the founders' wishes. Now free democracy conducts war games and peacekeeping missions. Ironic hypocrisy.
Falling tears, raindrops from your eyes. Falling rain, let it fall.
I scored high in my entrance exams on ASVAB and chose the 0341 with guaranteed Hawaii track. Graduated basic. Now MOS school's where I'm at. I'm more than a man with a 35-pound gun on my back. Plus my rifle 8 pounds and 65-pound pack. I'm 18, weigh a $195 and feel jack. 108 pounds on my back. A boot marine and Cadillacs. A short 20-mile hump. 4 quarts in my flat. After 7 miles, swearing in my right foot crack. I'm an E1. Tell my sergeant I think it snapped. He's an E5. Shouts private. Don't beat me crap. You got 2 feet. Compensate and don't fall back. After 4 more miles, my left foot joins in the act. Only 9 more to go. I walked them all, that's a fact. 1 certificate for intestinal fortitude, not having shat. And 3 months healing, lost Hawaii to Guantanamo. Rap.
Sergeant David grew I met in 6th grade. Dress greens, patent leather, and a high top fade. My mind was made up, I couldn't wait to grow up so I could sign up, man up, and stop the corrupt. A champion for God and country. Just wait till they get a load of me, an unstoppable PFC. Private first class, polished brass. I wanted to kill all the black pajamas that were hiding in the grass. But with no war in sight, my plight to fight never took flight. So I trained during the day and got drunk at night. Set my sights on all types of glory. Fast forward to Afghanistan, totally different story. IEDs, enemies, no front line to see. 80 pounds of gear in the desert, I could hardly breathe. Bloodstained fatigues, very many colleagues sent home to the VA to live with PTSD. Every day recruiters go to inner cities and ask for
falling tears, raindrops from your eyes. Falling rain, let it fall.
I never let my children volunteer for the military to make the same mistakes as I did these days could be deadly. If they're drafted with Dodging, my go back, stay ready. I support Manning and Snowden. You know where this country's heading. Global tyrant, hegemonic, bully police force, demonic practice, virgin sacrifice, bloodlust. Oil wars valuing corporations over people. This is sick worship by objects and pure evil. Material desires get more attention than spiritual. Benefits are based on profits, complaints aren't given view. Arms manufactured, supply both sides of conflicts. Do you have a problem with any of these statements or doubt their truth? I'm a father and a veteran, and I stand for peace. Julian Assange against our commanders-in-chief. But it's hard to be better when daily demands compete. I'm not ignoring the slaughter, I'm just trying to eat like you.
Falling tears, raindrops from your eyes. Falling rain, let it fall.
All right, human, what's good? Welcome. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for being with Stand Down Live today as we talk with Brittany Winner, Reality Winner's big sister. Reality Winner, a veteran of the United States Air Force, who shared with the American public the reality, the truth that there was interference in the 2016 elections, subsequently charged, questioned without a lawyer, and sentenced to the highest prison sentence that anyone has been subject to for that crime. At a time in our country and our world when people are calling for justice and peace and truth. And the reason that we started this show is to stand in unity, in solidarity with the uprising, the righteous uprising for Black lives, and Indigenous lives in this country and around the world. So I'm really happy to be talking with Brittany Winner today. We have Mike with us, and we have Natasha in the background. She's going to join us in a moment. And thank you for being here with us, Brittany.
Thank you so much for having me.
I know that yesterday your sister was denied compassionate release for COVID-19 care, and I'm curious how you're feeling, how you're dealing with it. Have you talked to her since?
Right. Yes, that's true. She was denied compassionate release yesterday, and as of now, there's no way we can further appeal it. The appeal was denied. So, as you can imagine, my family is devastated. We're heartbroken. We really thought that if one good thing came out of COVID and reality contracting COVID, and COVID having such a huge, horrible impact on the prison community, we thought that for sure this would be a good way to get her out now as opposed to later. And of course, our hopes were dashed, and we're really devastated. We have not been able to speak with her since, unfortunately. Her telephone privileges have been momentarily revoked for the rest of the month, and her mail is a little bit difficult to get to her at the moment. But email and video calls are still working for the time being. So I believe I have one scheduled tomorrow morning. So I know she's just going to be devastated and heartbroken and upset that her appeal was denied. So our main job tomorrow morning when I speak to her is going to be to try to cheer her up and just keep her aware of the light at the end of the tunnel, and that we're waiting for her, and everything's going to be okay.
She what does she have left in her sentence? It must be less than 2 years. Correct?
Correct. Her release date is November 23rd, 2021. However, if she qualifies and if everything lines up just right, she could actually go to a halfway house in Corpus Christi, which is a city next to where my parents live in Texas. She could go to the halfway house as early as May 2021. But again, as much as we're very hopeful that will work out for her, there are a bunch of things that need to fall perfectly into place for that to happen. And with COVID and with the uncertainty, we're just not sure that we can really, hang our hopes on that. So the main thing that we're hanging our hopes on is her clemency appeal. So her clemency petition that she filed. And so that's the kind of thing that needs to reach the White House. And that's the kind of thing that we want to get the message out there that Reality Winner has applied for clemency, which would commute her sentence so that she could spend the rest of it at home as opposed to in prison. And so that's our biggest ask right now, is for people to get the word out and for people to, try to make as much noise as possible on social media, because we need to reach somebody who has some sort of influence in the White House in this administration or the next. We're not content to wait until January. We just can't because, every day, every moment that we don't advocate for her, we feel like we're failing her. And so we're going to keep keep the pressure on. We're going to keep trying to advocate for her and to let as many people out there know that Reality Winner should not be in prison anymore. She deserves clemency. She's filed for clemency. And so we just want to get the attention of the right people who can make that happen for her.
Brittany, do you have that? Do you have a link for that? That clemency appeal?
I can certainly get that to you. Yes.
If you could get that to us now, we could put that in the banner, and then that'll get shared throughout this post and beyond.
Okay, I will ask.
And then I don't want to. I know Mike looks like he might have a question. I don't want to take over.
Yeah. Hi. So this is a kind of a veteran-based channel, and there's a lot of veterans out there that would like to provide support and would like to know more about the case. If you could just briefly just provide a little bit of background info, and then maybe talk about a little bit about the fact that she was interrogated without being arrested or provided read her rights or provided a lawyer. If you could go into some of the specifics of that, that'd be great.
Sure. So Reality served in the U.S. Air Force for 6 years as a cryptolinguist. And so she joined right after high school, decided to turn down a full ride scholarship to college because she really wanted to serve her country. And she wanted to eventually be deployed to Afghanistan for humanitarian work, through the U.S. military. And so she was inspired by our older stepbrother, who is actually a Russian linguist. And so once she kind of found out that that was a path that she could take with the military, she really wanted to focus on Middle Eastern languages. And so she started off learning Farsi and Dari, and then later on learned Pashto. And so she's an incredibly smart, gifted person, especially with languages, learning Latin in high school, for example, and then teaching herself some Arabic as well. And so with those language skills, she served in the drone program. And so intercepting, different communications between people, in Iran and Afghanistan. And so she actually received a commendation medal where she, in October of 2016, I have the numbers right here because they're big numbers. She geolocated over 120 enemy combatants and aided during 734 airborne missions. She removed over 100 enemies from the battlefield and aided in 650 enemy captures. And so her time in the U.S. Air Force, she did good work, and she, was really doing it to serve her country and, to help further, America's mission. She also really, in her private life, really, studied up on the culture of the Middle East, hoping eventually to get there. The fact that she was so interested in the Middle East and in, learning how to, for example, take down ISIS, was used against her. When she was eventually arrested and when they searched her house, the FBI agents, ransacking through her house, looking in her journals, of course she had a lot of information about the Middle East, and she had a lot of, information about Islam, for example, because she wanted to study it and she wanted to know the culture so that when she was deployed there in humanitarian, capacity, she could know the region very well. But of course, they twisted that against her, and the government actually denied her bail because they thought that she was going to run away and she was going to join ISIS or the Taliban, for example. And so it was kind of a little bit crazy how they used all of that and against her and kind of spun her into someone that she's not. But when she was arrested on June 3rd of 2017, she didn't know that she wasn't under arrest, for example. The heavily armed, all-male FBI agents descended on to her house in Georgia. It was a very small house. All Reality was really worried about at first was that her dog and her cat didn't get out the door because the FBI agents were holding the doors open, for example. They interrogated her without any any knowledge to her that she could have had an attorney present or that she didn't have to stay, for example. She didn't know that she wasn't in custody. So she thought that she was, under arrest, that she, couldn't go anywhere, etc. So the fact that she wasn't given her Miranda rights, or she wasn't given a Miranda warning, people will say, well, she wasn't under arrest. Well, she didn't know that she wasn't under arrest, for example. And so there's actually an off-Broadway play called Is This a Room? That was put together by a very talented team, and it works well. Even though you might not think that an FBI interrogation transcript would work well as a play, it does, because Reality's personality comes through, and in that play, you can cut the tension with a knife, because you can tell that Reality is scared. She doesn't think that she can leave. I mean, she's also at her own home, so where is she going to go? You know what I mean? She thought she was in custody, and it ended up being, just a really, really horrifying way that we believe that the government abused their power in arresting Reality and essentially, coercing her into speaking more than she should have.
I think did you want to follow up, Mike?
Well, yeah, I listened to a podcast where I listened to an audio play of it 2 or 3 times, actually. And I'm actually looking at the transcript here. And when you listen to it, it's incredibly obvious that the federal agents knew exactly what they were doing. Of course they do, right? That their plan was to go in and to pretend to be her best friend and to get a full confession out of her by through this like weird coercion tactic that they used without ever actually reading her rights. So to me that's absolutely fundamental to the case, and it should be fairly obvious in any country that has any interest in rule of law, that they would be able to that defense would be able to use that to defend Reality. So that's really unfortunate, and I would encourage everybody to go and look up the transcript and to find that play and listen to it. Do you know where people can listen to that play? Because I remember I listened to it several times, but then I couldn't find it.
I don't know.
No, okay.
I didn't actually know that it was able to be listened to. I saw it in person a few times, but that's great that there's a link out there.
Yeah,
we can definitely share it on Twitter.
Okay. All right. Awkward question. Sorry about that.
I know we have a document, and we can maybe during this conversation we can get that document into the chat.
I've got it right here.
Yeah, we can put. So Mike, please put that into, because the transcript of the what got turned into the play is really telling, like you said. I find it sad and really telling that they are able to twist this story, because this is the type of story that if the American public really knew about what happened to Reality Winner, what she did, and what she's accused of, and what she was charged with, more people would be behind her. And so spinning her interest in Middle East studies and culture to be somehow creating the story of collusion, or like that she's the bad guy, when what she's doing is exposing something totally unrelated with what they're trying to spin on, is just really sad to me. So I'm happy to see that she's got so much support from you, and I can see that you're really moved emotionally by sharing this and by being here. So I thank you for that, for the strength. But we have to get that call to action into the chat room somehow. We have to get that into the chat room, because the chat room is filled with people who like to do things and who want to do.
Yeah, I put the transcript into the chat so people can read it. Blatant abuse of power, as Ann Wright says there in the comments. So Brittany, so what is the strategy now? Where do we go from here in fighting for justice for Reality?
Well, again, I think we're mostly hanging our hopes on the petition for clemency, and that's something that needs to go to the White House. And so we have a number of somewhat high-profile people who have potential ins with the new administration. But again, we still think that if we reach the right person at the right time, through just overwhelming support for reality as well, that we'll be able to make a difference, and that somebody will eventually listen and will, take up her case and take her case to somebody who can make a change, such as the president. We also believe that the more voices there are on social media, the more awareness there is of her condition, that will also help her current state. So the fact that the prison is messing with her mail, for example, they have arbitrarily decided that she can't receive greeting cards. I believe this is prison-wide, but still, greeting cards, Touch Note, which is a service that makes photos onto postcards, so customizable postcards, are no longer able to be received by her. These little things that the prison is doing just to make her and her fellow inmates' lives miserable, if they do it in the dark, then nobody's going to be able to do anything about it, for example. So every time that we hear that these injustices are happening within FMC Carswell, during this really trying time when she just wants to get her mail, she wants to get photos of her new, baby niece, for example. The more that we can get people's attention, the less that the prison is able to get away with. And so, as we know, things, terrible things can be done in the dark, but if we say something about it and if we bring it to the light, then we think we can make it stop, or we can make somebody answer for why they're doing this to her and the other inmates. And so in the past, for example, when she received, her COVID diagnosis and the guards were really, mistreating her and, really, for whatever reason, singling her out, we complained to the prison, but we also took to social media, and there were articles written about the horrible conditions in the prison, while COVID was happening. And things actually did get better for her because they knew that we were paying attention and that, we were listening, and the world was suddenly looking at them like, why are you doing this horrible thing? These poor prisoners, these inmates don't have anything else. Why are you making their lives more miserable? Why is this so bad? Like, COVID in prisons is such a huge problem right now, obviously, because you have people who can't socially distance, who often can't practice basic hygiene, like washing their hands or using hand sanitizer, or, et cetera. And these people don't have to make it as bad as it is. They don't have to treat people like they're subhuman, for example. And so the more attention we can get, the more publicity we can get, I think the better that Reality's life, while she's still in prison, can be, and her fellow inmates.
Yeah, thank you for that response. So specifically about Reality in prison and her experience with COVID, I understand that she did test positive. Mm-hmm. Is there any other details that you can relay about her experience with other prisoners and COVID specifically?
So all of the inmates were really afraid to say that they had symptoms, for example, because they were worried that they were going to be sent to isolation, so sent to a solitary. If they were extra sick, and they were not getting any sort of therapy or help or any, they weren't getting any medical care. But she did say, since FMC Carswell is a medical unit, there are some very sick older inmates in there that have pre-existing conditions and that are very, very, very sick. Prior to, I think it was in April, there was an inmate named Andrea Circle-Bear who was transferred to FMC Carswell, and very soon after she was transferred, tested positive for COVID, was in a coma, ended up giving birth by cesarean section, and then unfortunately Andrea died. So I don't know how many inmates in Reality's unit have passed away due to COVID, for example, other than that one high profile case. I think that Reality is probably afraid to talk about certain things like that. She doesn't want for example, all of her privileges to now be revoked, for talking too much. It's always kind of a balance of how much we can get out there and how much pressure we can say, until it turns into retaliation. For example, we've been afraid forever that if we spoke out, or if Reality was afraid that if she spoke out that there would be retaliation. But again, this past summer when she tested positive for COVID, it got so bad, the retaliation was already so bad that we said, well, how much worse can it get? And so that's when we started putting more pressure. But as far as the other inmates go, and as far as, how many people are symptomatic or were symptomatic or, currently are suffering from COVID, we just don't know. We don't have any visibility. And the prison is no longer testing the inmates, presumably to keep their case numbers low. If you don't have any tests, then you don't have any cases, and you don't get these horrible reports of, 75% of the inmates are now testing positive for COVID. We just don't know at this point. And it's becoming clear, at least from things that I have read, that once you test positive for COVID, it's not over for you. You can test positive later on. You can get symptoms later on. And so this is something that we're constantly worried about. We're constantly worried about Reality contracting COVID again, for example, or suffering severe symptoms and just not telling us or not letting us know, or potentially suffering any sort of complications of that. So it's hard being in the dark. And I know it's hard for other families of inmates that are at FMC Carswell or at facilities nationwide.
I shared, Brittany, I shared an article from The Intercept, which
Excellent.
Links the petition, which has the petition for clemency in there. It highlights the link. It looks like it's a document. I don't know if it's something we can sign online, but I feel for you. I feel for your family, and FMC Carswell. We looked it up. It's a federal prison. You said you said maximum security.
Mm-hmm.
It's got 1,200. It's got over 1,200 inmates. And when I look at this about page, this description, I'm just now starting to research it on this prison, but it looks like it's privately owned. They talk about 122 prisons around the nation that their employees work at, and so it sends me down this other road to this article on the Sentencing Project. There's actually one on the Marshall Project, what you were just talking about, written by the Marshall Project, which is tracking in live time COVID outbreaks in prisons around the country. I mean, as good as they can, given what you said, because people aren't trying to report fully. So I'll share that in the chat as well for people. And I'll bring in Miss Natasha, who I'm sure has questions and is definitely lively part of this conversation and family. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Brittany, for being here. Yeah, I was just kind of hanging out in the background, just listening and just managing controls. But I'm curious to know a little bit about Reality. I know that she honorably served in the Air Force. I tell these two guys all the time that if you're a former airman, you're the smartest person in the room. Jab there, because I'm an Air Force veteran as well. But what is, let's talk, tell us a little bit about, Reality, what, I heard you talk about her wanting to, serve the country, in the footsteps of others in the family. Just tell me a little bit, and let's personify who she is as we're, pushing for or supporting clemency. So yeah, take up a little time and tell us a little bit about who she is and what outside of this case, what her story is.
Well, the thing to know about Reality is that she's really different in a way, but she's also just like any other millennial, right? She likes the same things that most people like. It's really strange with our family kind of being somewhat in the spotlight, and Reality being somebody who, has captured some national attention, when it's like, who, my sister? She's a regular person, just like you or me. She's extremely smart. She's extremely talented, and she has a propensity for picking up and learning languages. So she learned Farsi, Dari, and Pashto when she was in the U.S. Air Force, employed as a cryptolinguist. And so she wanted to use those language skills eventually to go over to Afghanistan for humanitarian aid, like I mentioned. But the thing about reality is that she is one who can't really just not think about all the things that are happening in the world. For example, she's also, really super upset about climate change, for example. She's an activist for the environment. She used to rail against people using air conditioning, for example. I would say that in terms of, trying to describe my sister, is she has no chill, basically. She's always thinking about people who are less fortunate than her. She's always thinking about how she could potentially make somebody else's life better. And so hence the humanitarian, endeavors that she would have liked to do in Afghanistan, trying to make the lives of women and children, particularly orphan children in Afghanistan. That was just her dream. She wasn't satisfied with the idea of, the white picket fence in the house and the, et cetera. She didn't seem like she really wanted to settle down as much as she wanted to get out and help the world. She has a lot of energy. She has a lot of drive. She loves to work out, loves to eat healthy. She really pushes herself to be the very best person that she can. And I know that it might sound kind of trite, because, most people would want to be described that way, but she really did personify it. She's incredibly high spirited. She's super funny. She and I kind of have our own way of speaking to each other, our own language, but in between all the intelligent things, that she loves and that she's also just very, very funny. And so we spend a lot of our time on the phone, just quoting SpongeBob to each other, for example, or quoting, Courage the Cowardly Dog, different, cartoons that we loved as kids. And so there's a very mischievous, just fun-loving, childlike aspect to her that, that's kind of her safe place where she can kind of retreat from the dark, scary world sometimes, and we can just, be sisters, and we can, pretend like everything's okay. So my sister, I frequently describe her as indescribable, but actually one of the best pieces of literature that was written about my sister was written by Carrie Howley, who did extensive interviews with my mother and with me to try to describe reality. And so I would recommend that people check out that article as well. I'll be posting a link on the comments momentarily, just so that you can also, if you want to read up more about reality. That was probably, again, one of the best things that was written that comprehensively kind of shows you what kind of person she is. But at the end of the day, she really loves, she's somebody who is very passionate and loves her country, loves her family, loves the environment, loves animals, and just genuinely loves, people who are less fortunate than her. And so I think that's what also makes this all the more heartbreaking. What has happened to her is she had faith in a system. She served her country, and then it feels like her country turned on her and has, put her in prison, denied her bail 4 times, denied her compassionate release due to COVID, and, just feels like a very vindictive, a very harsh, way for her to sort of, break her relationship, with the government. And, how is she supposed to come out of this with any more faith in the system or any peace with how they've treated her is kind of my question, my worry. And I hope and I pray that she's the same kind of person, the same loving, genuine, wonderful person that went into prison, that will come out of prison. So we try to be there for her. We try to support her as best we can through this terrible situation. But again, what we need right now is we need people to be aware and people to care about what's going on with my sister Reality so that we can get her clemency.
I'm curious because I'm not quite sure. What does the support for clemency actually look like? So I know that the petition is sent, through attorneys, and that was a process. How can people get engaged and support that process? Is that, contacting our representatives? Is it the Department of Justice? What do you all need in terms of that?
I think, let me see, contacting representatives. I think that would probably be fine. I don't know if that would end up, really being something that will, push it over the edge. What we're hoping, and maybe this is naive, but what we're really hoping is for the right person to be moved by reality's story and reality's circumstance. And so, the more people who are talking about reality, the more people who are posting on social media about reality, for example, we want to reach a wide audience, and we want to reach the person who can make a big difference. And so we eventually need to reach somebody who has pull and who has influence at the White House, whether with this current administration or the next. And so that's our main goal right now. We feel like we've done everything possible that we could do in the courts. As far as, petitions, as far as appeals, she has a great legal team. But again, she can't seem to catch a break with the Justice Department. She can't seem to catch any luck whatsoever in her appeals. And it doesn't seem like we're getting anywhere through that route. And so it's come to the point where we, sometimes it feels like we don't know quite what to do. But what we know is that they can't keep doing this to her in the dark. It's been almost 4 years at this point. We can't let reality suffer in there without people knowing what's going on. If we also bring attention to the conditions at FMC Carswell, we also believe that will help out her fellow inmates as well. So if conditions improve, they don't just improve for reality. We want them to improve for everybody.
Well, she did, she did a really beautiful thing, a powerful thing, an empowering thing in a time when doing such things is vilified. She's not the first one to be a whistleblower. And, really, we see now that as the election has tried to be he continually tries to steal the election after everyone knows that this man has lost the election. Then we clearly know why he was given such a hard sentence. It aligns with with this administration's ideal, sad to say. I don't believe the irony of this moment is lost on anybody. Um, you know, the fact that she's doing the right thing and she's a patriot, um, and suffers, um, I think she has a beautiful name. You know what I'm saying? I think her name is really beautiful, and I think her name speaks to the moment, to the power of the moment as well. And she will surely be known and remembered, uh, along with I think great patriots in this country. Um, it's an act that she did that I think transcends patriotism. I say that loosely. I don't believe a patriot is a person who I believe a patriot is a person who challenges the norms and challenges the power structure. So it's really, really great to have you on the show today and to and see that it's something that it's meaningful to you and your family. Um, thank you.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, if there are any developments, Brittany, like you and I are connected, like you just posted, if there's something significant, we'd love to have you back on. And if there is something that comes up that's more of a call to action that we folks can actually do, the hashtag that's been trending on Twitter, it's either Free Reality Winner and also Free Reality Winner now. If you're on social media, post, some thoughts and use those hashtags. And again, Brittany, you have an open invitation to come back on and keep us updated.
And
thank you very much.
And I would say write letters of support. A nice call to action for people, and especially incarcerated people, is letters. So you can write letters to Reality Winner, and you can write letters to the Texas State federal penitentiary to release her. She received over 4,000 letters of support along with that petition for clemency. So letters are a helpful way, good action.
Excellent. Thank you.
You know, that's I hope that this show gets a lot of views afterwards, and the call to action gets amplified even more. It's really sad uh to to be the trumpeters, you know what I'm saying? In what feels like the last days. Uh, um, these numbers that I shared a couple of numbers in the chat on from one is from the Sentencing Project, capitalizing on mass incarceration, U.S. growth in private prisons, and this is a really in-depth article about the growth in the private prison industry, tracked it from 2000 to 2016. The article was written in 2018, so it's a 16-year. They have a 16-year window that they're looking at, you know. And while we know that private prisons are growing, it's kind of incredible the way they're growing, and how and where. So we're talking about a federal prison that Reality Winner is housed in, and then people are like, well, can a federal prison be private? And yes, a federal prison can be private. They have a number of them. So you can have state prisons that are private, and federal prisons that are privately run, privately owned, where investors are sharing on the stock market. The growth in private prisons from 2000 to 2016 was 120%. So it went from 15,000 people and 15,500 people in federal prisons in 2000 to 34,159 people in federal prisons in 2016. And that's federal private prisons. And then private immigrant detention centers, the growth has been 442%. And I'm sure, and that ended in 2016, they're counting. I'm sure that is probably skyrocketed under number 45. That number is probably out the roof. So
yeah, I think that's a good point, Miles, that you're making. I'm just thinking about, if folks aren't already tracking this, there are a few documentaries. I don't know where you are, but here we're under stay-at-home orders due to COVID spike. So watching a lot of Netflix these days. If you have a subscription, challenge everyone to watch The 13th. It's a documentary that's out there that talks a lot about the systems of incarceration and just really the private industry that, a lot of us are just not aware that we've, now monetized incarcerating people. And so, and then trading on it, so it's wild. There are many other, documentaries, but this is one of those topics that a lot of folks who are into prison reform or just criminal justice reform as a whole are running into, is that you don't know when they're privately owned. And that's a limiting factor in a lot of ways. So to hear Brittany talk about that particular prison and how they were testing and then they completely stopped, who, how many people are really behind that, and you'd be surprised how many investors, how many representatives, electeds are benefit monetarily from those industries.
That article I shared from the Marshall Project, it's tracking COVID numbers in real time in prisons. It's a living document. You can click on it and click on your state, and you can find the numbers of COVID cases in your state at the prisons. It's an incredible one. And also this other one from the sentencingproject.org. This breaks down where prisons are located, whether they're private or public, to an extent. I mean, but you can also go look at the prison. You just look up the prison itself, and then you click on its about, or you click on its FAQs, and you can find out this information. The thing is that this is not the popular thing to do. People who are moved by this are moved to find out more and to get involved, but we need to make it cool, right? Like, these conversations need to be popularized and monetized in ways that are really cool for people to latch on to. Like Orange is the New Black, kind of like, it sugarcoats it. You know what I'm saying? It makes it like, it's like people feel like, oh, they know what jail is like, and then knowing about it is enough. But the call to end it needs to be amplified drastically. I think Reality Winner is a hero. She's like a superhero. She did the right thing. She, like, the story that Brittany told about how she is as a person, and then what she did, she clearly did the right thing.
Yeah, and I think it's obvious that the growth of, they're connected. Everything is intersectional. And so the growth of this prison industrial complex and the private prison and even, the concentration camps on the southern border with all the immigrants. I mean, these people really are, they're persecuted. They're victims of a broken system. And so these things are related, and Reality is very obviously a political prisoner. She's not somebody who really committed, a state crime or something like treason or anything. There's an interesting, when you look at the transcript, there's an interesting paragraph here that I'd like to read really quick. When the federal agents, were interrogating her without reading her rights or providing a lawyer, one of the things they said to her was, I think what we both think is that maybe you made a mistake. Maybe you weren't thinking for a minute. Maybe you got angry. Like he said, I mean, that's what I'm hoping. If that's the case, then that's what makes us feel a little better, knowing that we don't have a real serious problem here. That's something that concerns us too. This isn't an ongoing problem, but we need to figure it out. And if it was a mistake, let's deal with it. Okay, so end quote. So when the federal agents were there interrogating her, they admitted that they knew that this was a well-meaning person, a person that was, distinguished and had served, with integrity and honor according to the empire's, line or agenda. And despite the fact they were going to throw her under the bus, they were going to interrogate her without a lawyer, and then they were going to get some super hypercritical reactionary judge to put her under the prison and give her the strongest what's the word I'm thinking of, sentence than any other person in history for a similar crime. And so, yeah, my point is that all these things are connected, that the real priority is the growth of the prison industrial complex, and by any means necessary, even their own kind. They'll throw their own kind in prison and forget about them and deny them any sort of justice, and then expose them to disease and whatnot without actually dealing with the problem there as well.
Yeah, it kind of struck me when she mentioned that essentially her service was potentially used against her, right? So when we talk about 6 years is a long time. To pretend as if you're un-American, right? And then to do that honorably, and then to be decorated, well above her, to be, receive the medal that she did, was, considered, kudos to who she was. and to see that be used against her is what we see happen with a lot of times with political prisoners, right? It's so unfortunate.
Yeah, I really sympathize with her because I had a secret clearance once when I was in the military, and here's how stupid the military is and how it like doesn't work. I spent about 8-9 months learning how to be a public affairs specialist. I was a person that was going to do outward facing propaganda, and as soon as I arrived at my first command, I was put into a secret compartment and made an intelligence person, right? I worked in a secret compartment, and all of a sudden I was like this intelligence person, and I'm like, man. And I very well could have been reality, or I could have been any one of these other leakers. I worked in several secret compartments, even in Iraq when they were doing, I saw things. They have this saying like "need to know." Do you need to know? I worked in all these compartments where I didn't need to know anything, and I was exposed to all kinds of this stuff. So I really sympathize with her. It could have been me. It could have been a lot of people, and it's the result of a fundamentally broken system. It's just set up to fail from the very begining. Did we lose Natasha? Did I talk too much?
No. You didn't. You don't take things personal, brother.
Okay.
I know you posted Amanda's comment earlier. I think it was Amanda who posted about the new Jim Crow. Yeah. The new Jim Crow is an excellent book. Definitely a recommended read. We got some comments over here about prison isn't anything like boot camp, and some interesting stuff going on in the feed. I could see the reference to a boot camp, prison boot camp reference. Depends on the context, taking things out of context is always is screwy, this woman's act of bravery being used against her and against the American people is really sad. We really are like the empire. It's like the Empire Strikes Back. You know what I'm saying? It's like we're part of like being American now, and being patriotic and going around the world like proud to be American is tantamount to like being a stormtrooper. You're like you're holding up the Intergalactic Federation. I mean, you're against the Intergalactic Federation, right? Because that's peaceful, right? Like the Empire is pure evil, man. It's a damn shame. It's a crying shame. It really is a crying shame. I want to play Bill Withers on here. I'm gonna shout out people that we're not allowed to play because we don't have copyright freedoms and permission. But I want to play some Bill Withers on here. I want to play some Mighty Sparrow. Let's get the
protest
going,
music,
man.
That's right.
I want to read this. I want to read a little something to y'all, okay?
While you cue that up, Mike, you were on point. I got a new puppy who took an advantage of me being on here to tear into her snacks. So.
Oh, okay. That's fair.
I think I'm speaking to the choir, and people know this, but it's pretty staggering. And the United States, this is from the sentencingproject.org. The United States has the world's largest private prison population. Of the 1.5 million people in state and federal prisons in 2016, 8.5%, or 128,063, were incarcerated in private prisons. Another 26,249 people, or 73% of all people in immigration detention, were confined in privately run facilities on a daily basis during 2017. From 2000 to 2016, the number of people housed in private prisons increased 5 times faster than the total prison population. So that's like the fastest growing industry in America right now is private prisons. It's growing faster than anything else. That means more private prisons are being built in this country, and more beds are being made to house citizens than any other industry in the country.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's becoming more obvious day to day that the U.S. is like running towards becoming a failed state. essentially.
Yeah.
You know, I just saw a headline that Musk had, Elon Musk, he made $10 billion in one day, in a single day. Anybody who can make $10 billion in one day while they're, you know, while the only real industry in the United States is the building of cages and prisons for people, is like, I mean, that's the dream. That's the capitalist dream, is just to consolidate all the wealth and then have robots make everything. And then everybody else can just, like, you know, fight for scraps or live in cages, one of the two. That's the end game of the United States project.
Yeah, when you mention that, you're right, Mike. And then I think about not just the people who are in these centers, but I think it was said that one of the popular, you know, hip hop legends recently invested in the monitoring, the ankle. So basically, the ankle bracelets, right? And so there are far more people who are impacted by that type of imprisonment. And here, quite honestly, in Chicago, it's out of control. So I get it. There's, you know, the decarceration, but, you know, you're really incarcerated, you know, at home. And that is becoming $1 billion, or it is $1 billion industry where people are investing in that, right? These are some of the same people who are on here talking about criminal justice reform, have found a way to enrich themselves with that.
Well, it makes sense if you're talking about criminal justice reform, but then your music is subconsciously reinforcing criminal behavior. You can do both, because then you're going to benefit from on the back end from your investments in those ankle bracelets, and on the front end from your public face being good about reform. You know, I rap about this lifestyle because I see it in the hood, right? But it's not. I don't advocate for it. Look at my public face. Look at what I'm out here doing.
Mm-hmm. It's wicked.
Yeah.
And then we were talking earlier about, you know, when we think about at the federal level, not just federal, but also state, when you see these conversations happening, and you wonder why, after a summer of massive global and national protest for, you know, liberation, and justice, you wonder why there's such a hesitation, because this is how people feed themselves or buy their yachts. So it's kind of sick that when we look at the quest for justice is tied up in how other people make their billions.
Yeah, that's right. With Elon Musk and his, he's seeking the lithium to make his electric cars in Bolivia, and he even went so far. You know, they went so far as to try and overthrow the Bolivian government with a right-wing fascist coup, and they were successful for a time. But luckily, the people rose up and threw. Was it Juan Guaido? Or no, it was Aves. It was a white woman. It was like a Gusano white woman with blonde hair. She was like this fascist dictator of Bolivia for a short time, and she got thrown out. Yeah, so Elon Musk's wealth is directly tied to imperialism, and we benefit from that here in the core.
I think what people don't like. Okay, so fake news is real, right? Like the term fake news is real because the news, the major news outlets are owned by billionaires, and so they put out the same lines, and that's why all the major outlets, all the cable outlets across the country will say the same things at the same time and print or publish the same papers and decide on what they will and won't publish, and that's because there is a line being towed. So yeah, who knows what the true story is, right? About our reality winner, right? What information she actually had and what she actually wanted to give to the people, right? Versus what we're told and versus what's shared with us.
Sorry.
No.
Your thought. Here's something that was mind blowing to me. You know, got promoted, went to this I feel like I got closer to the truth at my last assignment, right? So that's where I'm in the room with the 3-star, the 2-star, who's, giving this brief. And at the end of it was a crew of our comms folks who developed media releases and sent them. And for some strange reason, they show up in the media. I had no idea that, the command level was, sending, basically a narrative. And, for the purposes of just saying this, that it was in contrast or in conflict of what was really going on. So if that's happening, the Pentagon releases or I should say the military releases coming out that way, we just don't know, that it's a controlled narrative across the board, perhaps, no matter what the topic, right? So
we certainly know it's a controlled narrative because we have an empire, because we have tax money being taken from the country and being funneled overseas to military bases, made to look like resorts, made to look like you're at a golf club, or I'm saying, like you're back home in South Carolina. So we know that there's corruption, and we know that it's faulty.
Yeah. Well, speaking of like Star Wars earlier, there's a famous interview where George Lucas talks about the business of making movies. He talks about how he respected the Soviet filmmakers of the 70s and 80s because they had such a great artistic perspective. They could cover all kinds of different things and do all kinds of interesting artistic statements. That led to some of the greatest movies of all time. But George Lucas said that when he makes movies, any movie, it has to be profitable. So you have to be able to appeal to a very narrow spectrum of commercialization in order to make money. And so he admits that in his own movies. And that's why in Star Wars, Star Wars was so successful, because he was able to do that. He knew the game that he had to play. He had to appeal to this very narrow line of commercialization.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So, but that's connected to the media and everything. It's all connected. It's all a profit-making system. They all have boards of directors and investors. And so it's very hard to know what to believe and who to trust.
And it's to what end? Why? To control the narrative is to control the way people behave and their response. So a lot of times when we look at it's tough to get, political education, to the people. And it's because it's hard to change beliefs because the media is priming society. Clearly that's the motive. I wanted to just that's what I take from how you control the narrative, right? If people really knew why there should be a push to defund the Pentagon. If they really knew what was happening, I think there would be massive support for the withdrawal of our troops from these conflicts, and to redistribute those funds to social services here at home.
Yeah, and talking about the news, like recently, there's been a lot of interesting things that have gone on internationally that just aren't in the headlines. Like, for example, 250 million people recently striked in India.
Yeah.
There was a massive general strike, the biggest general strike in the history of the world, because they live in such a stratified society, such a class-based system where there's just mass poverty. They spoke up, and they were out there flying hammer and sickle flags, and there's not a single mention of it in the New York Times or the Washington Post. They ain't talking about it.
Right.
It's outrageous.
Look at this wonderful post. We got a couple of them in a row. Look at this one from Matthew Dolgenin. There is hypocrisy all over. DC Mayor Muriel Bauer has Black Lives Matter painted in 35-foot tall letters on a street near the White House, but also proposed a $45 million increase in police budget and the construction of a new $500 million jail. I mean, and it's constant, it's rampant, and it's all goes back to money. Like Natasha said, it's like capitalism. We have this narrow window, right, of what you can what you can do to get a message to people, because you've had this narrative from birth about capitalism good, capitalism free,
Right.
capitalism equal freedom. You know what I'm saying? Socialism bad. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's so it hits you on a very primal level, because you've been indoctrinated through cartoons, through music, through Hollywood. It's really sinister. It's sinister and it's evil because it's a flat out lie. You
Yeah.
know, it's just it's people have been misinformed, uh, decade after decade, generation after generation. Like my mom is I love my mom to bits. I love my mom, but she's like, the word socialist scares her, and so like the idea of Bernie Sanders scares her, and it's
Yeah.
like that's so it's the irony in there. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're of the same generation. He was fighting the good fight when you were fighting the good fight, and he's been doing it ever since. And somehow you've gone down this other road, you know. And I think it happens to a lot of people. People get conservative as they get older. They get scared. It's easy to get scared, you know. I'm
What
trying.
type of political education would you recommend for people?
What kind of education, political education, would I
Or
recommend?
like podcasts? Are there? I know Mike is always bringing a book every time we're, having conversations.
Yeah, where is it? Oh, I'm reading this right now. Read this. Defying the Tomb. It's about prison abolition.
I recommend
what I'm
the
reading.
new Jim Crow by do I have it right here?
Michelle Alexander, I believe.
Yeah, by Michelle Alexander. I recommend the new Jim Crow. I recommend Radical Democracy, that I have behind me, by Douglas Loomis. He's a VFP member. Kamathi Speaks, to learn about the Mau Mau revolution in you know what I'm saying, in Kenya. I would say all of that and more. You know what I'm saying? There's so much out there. There's so much out there. But read stuff about socialism. Get into Karl Marx, and then learn how it evolved. You know what I'm saying? Like, learn how it's evolved, and people have used it around the world, because it's a really powerful thing. It's communion. You know what I'm saying? It's we have the technology on our planet at this point to have a totally peaceful socialist society, a planetary socialist society based in resources and education. You know what I'm saying? A resource-based economy where people can thrive and flourish, because we're not focusing on war and scarcity. False scarcity is only used to create the myth of that capitalism is like the natural means of the natural order of things, but it's not. Community is natural, right? Communism, communal thinking, communal thought. So many things in our society are communist when
Yeah.
you really think about it.
I see someone here made a comment that they have a radical diversity book club. So look for those. If you're on Eventbrite, which is usually free, there are a ton of workshops out there. If you just kind of do a keyword search, get involved. You never know what might be available in your hometown, where they meet virtually on Zoom to chop it up.
Don't we have a book club here in VFP? We have a VFP, a Veterans for Peace book club, and I think they read White Fragility recently.
They did.
I forget the author's name, but I saw her speak on Democracy Now!
Yeah, those can be powerful.
Yeah.
And then, I was just, thinking that we talked about having people on. It was great to have Brittany on. I saw their mom was in the chat room. So just really to bring her story up front. VFP has supported Reality's fight for years now, dating back to, when it really became public. So we're, proud to continue to do that and would have them on. And I know we talked about having others on. When we talk about political prisoners, some of our Black Panthers are elders, and we forget about, how, just this idea of being a political prisoner has impacted so many people in pockets of the world that we haven't really talked about. So I know we have a guest lined up to join us around that. I'm also thinking about how we can really be intentional to bring up the military, the misuse of the military prison, dare I say, complex and industry. We don't often talk about that. You don't often hear about that. There are tons of military prisons out there where, active duty members are, sentenced to, years. Some of them return to active duty. Some of them, are discharged, and all of their benefits are gone for a lifetime. So when we have a part 2 of this conversation, I'm hoping that we can talk a little bit more about how the military justice system impacts people in ways that most don't talk about.
Yes.
I know we're at time. I want to do a quick, for those who are out there who will listen. I know we usually don't have a lot of folks that when we're live, but these shows have been, we'll have to look at the time maybe next year, because it looks like folks are usually tuning in around, the 6 o'clock after work hour. But those that are out there, we know you watch this after the show. If you're interested in becoming a VFP member, it's not just for veterans. It's also for active duty. We have active duty members.
And family, you can be an associate member.
Yeah. So go to our website, veteransforpeace.org, click join, click through our work, where we are really intentional about making change, because peace is possible. And then for those that are active duty, we have a space for peer support. So stand down at Veterans for Peace. Is that right, Miles? What's our email address?
I believe that's it. Stand down at veteransforpeace.org.
Okay, yeah. Email us where we, provide confidential peer support. We have had folks that have been reaching out, and we've been contacting folks, like pairing folks with their military branch that we have to support folks who are questioning deployments, who are questioning, just where things are in terms of their consciousness. So we're proud to continue to do that. Stay tuned. We have a great rest of the month of events, or I should say guests and topics that we're going to talk about. So I'm looking forward to that. Over to you, Miles.
I think we have FAQ week next week, or is FAQ week the following week? I'm sorry. Okay. I won't call you. I won't put on blast like that, but I know we're going to have a FAQ week coming up soon, so where people can ask questions, get our opinions on stuff in live time. And then we are going to do an end of the year review, because we've been doing this for over half of a year now, every week. And we've grown, and we feel like y'all have grown with us a little bit. So we want to show some of that growth to y'all. And then the song that we're playing at the beginning of the show, that song is produced by Too Deep, and it features Guy Ron Solero Vanterpool, as well as myself, Megacyph. So the name of the song is Volunteers, and it's available on the 2014 album Civil I Am. That was a little piece of business I wanted to share. And
someone here in the comment, Miles, is telling us to cover. Oh, I'm sorry. I think there's a little bit of a delay. I didn't hear you, and I talked over you.
No, you're good.
Someone was saying to cover Fort Hood. I know we wanted to talk about that this week, but in the interest of time, trust me, that's on the topic that we will discuss next week. We see the latest developments. We know that it's not just Fort Hood, and I'm quite concerned about the media release and how it's framed. Is that, will there be real change? So we plan to talk about that next week. So tune in for that.
Yeah, that's right. Next week is the FAQ show. And then the week after that is a conversation with Santa Claus, Al Gutowski, who is a Vietnam anti-war veteran who also happens to play Santa Claus every year. So that should be a lively and hilarious conversation.
Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your awesomeness and your energy and support, solidarity. Peace and power to y'all. Peace and power.